I'm here so I won't get fined.
You think you know sports? Well, you don't know. Well, you don't know Jack. The You Don't Know Jack Show starts now.
Hello and welcome to the You Don't Know Jack Show. And today on the You Don't Know Jack Show, I am Carson, of course, and today we're joined by Eric Eager of many different places. He's been to different colleges. He now teaches at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and Eric also is a analytics writer slash contributor, stats and analytics for Pro Football Focus. So we want to thank Eric for joining us today. Eric, how's it going on a Thursday morning?
Not too bad. Pretty cold, but we made it to work, so everything's good. Yep.
All right. Well, it's supposed to be up to 42 degrees possibly here in Northwest Iowa, so we're definitely going to take that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
What do you guys got there for a temperature?
I think it's probably in the 20s, but it's just icy. It's just slippery everywhere. So
Yeah.
you're just, I don't have the agility I once had. So you have to sort of meander around aimlessly.
Yeah. No, that sounds like what we had the last couple of days, and that is not fun. That is for sure. So. Once again, Eric, thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself without going into too much detail. Just tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was, a traditional sort of high school football player, one that, so when my career was over, I wanted to play college, and I ended up playing at a Division II school in Northwest Minnesota called Minnesota State Moorhead, which is in the same conference as where Adam Thielen went.
Yes.
Yeah, and I played tight end there. I started a couple years, and then by the time my career was over, I realized I wanted to go into mathematics. So I went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln for my PhD, and then when that was finished, I started at University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. But I remained a football fan. I sort of had no interest in playing again, but I remained a football fan. And then a few years into my career as a mathematician, I decided I wanted to, apply some of the statistical and mathematical skills that I have to football. So I latched on to Pro Football Focus, and this is I'm just completing my second year as an analyst, consultant, writer, all that kind of stuff for PFF, a company that I had a lot of admiration for, and certainly that hasn't waned since kind of getting inside of the process. So.
All right. Well, definitely. Well, congratulations on being there 2 years. I hope to be in that kind of a sphere someday, whether it's writing or professional broadcasting. That's kind of where my main goal is to be, but we'll see how things continue to pan out in that area. So, just want to ask, how were you in your football career as a tight end?
Oh, I mean, I was mostly a blocker. I was a wide receiver my first couple of years, but I didn't make it onto the field very much. And then we had an offensive coordinator that wanted to run a lot of 2 tight end sets, and so he made me into a tight end. And then the coaching staff that was there when that happened got fired, and so I ended up resigned, and then I ended up playing tight end in more of a spread offense, and so I was mostly there as kind of a lead blocker for the run game, and pass protector. But I caught 3 touchdowns or something like that my senior year. I don't know what my PFF grade would have been had they graded Division II college games back then. But I don't know. I enjoyed my time. I really, the thing I miss the most is just hanging out with my teammates and everything like that. Yeah, it was enjoyable. I was nowhere near a superstar by any stretch, though.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What would you give yourself on a PFF grading scale? But yeah, obviously it wasn't around back then, as even though it's not been that long ago, but PFF is pretty young, at least for the statistics part of it, I would say. So, so you were at the Pittsburgh-Kansas City game as we dig into a little NFL talk here. What'd you think of that? And just some key takeaways, as you're kind of like a quasi Chiefs fan, quasi Vikings fan a little bit, kind of in that mix, are you not?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Maplewood, Minnesota, which is a suburb of St. Paul. So I grew up a Vikings fan very much. I can still remember where I was when, like, Morton Anderson kicked the ball through in the NFC Championship game, and
Yep.
I can still remember, I have a lot of memories as a Vikings fan, and when I lived in Lincoln, Nebraska, there was around the time where there was actually like some real steam that the Vikings might move to Los Angeles, and I thought to myself that I had absolutely no desire to root for a Los Angeles Vikings team. And the Kansas City Chiefs were on every single week, and I think one of those years they were kind of like a little plucky 10-6 team with Matt Castle at quarterback, and so I always thought, Kansas City's about a 3-hour drive from Lincoln, so I've been to Arrowhead a handful of times, and so I decided I would be a Chiefs fan. But it's sort of weird. It's different. Like, I feel like the Vikings are my kids. Like, I'm not only disappointed in them, disappointed for them. I get sad. Like the Chiefs game, I was sort of over it by like the time I got down the stairs after the game was over. Mm-hmm. But I think in that game, you look at sort of the Chiefs' deficiencies, and they've been sort of deficiencies all year. Even when some of their defensive linemen were healthy, they were still giving up a substantial amount of play against the run. I think they gave up 4.4 yards a carry. And so going in, I was not particularly confident in their ability to stop Le'Veon Bell, and Le'Veon Bell had 170 yards at like 5.5 a clip. So that was an issue. The Chiefs, I think had a decent game plan, to give up a bunch of yards to Bell, but then they ended up giving up a couple big plays to Antonio Brown, and Jesse James, the tight end, really lit them up. So, I mean, I think the Chiefs were really handled by Pittsburgh, and we're just lucky that Pittsburgh, I think, was held to 6 field goals instead of scoring a touchdown or 2. So I don't know. And I was interested, as I was driving back from Kansas City, all the sports talk shows were talking about Alex Smith and how, they're mostly fed up with him. And that was a dynamic that, being somebody who doesn't live there, I had no idea was really a huge point of contention in that fan base. So that was interesting, because I thought Alex Smith had sort of brought that team to respectability as opposed to being a liability, but that's just my thought.
Yeah, well, I know you mentioned as you wrote an article on that, just posted or published yesterday, on what you think about Alex Smith and his future. And if you look at the options for the Chiefs, it's not like there's a whole lot of good quarterbacks out there to select from. I mean, and he's been, I think he ranked 13th in PFF's grading system as a quarterback, and I think that's about pretty good. I mean, it's not like you're going to find a top 10 quarterback on the street very often.
That's right. And I mean, so I've you look back at what the Chiefs have had to deal with. In 2007, Damon Heward was their starting quarterback. In 2008, they had Tyler Thigpen, who was a draft pick out of the Vikings.
Yeah.
And then they spent a decent amount of money on Matt Castle, and he never panned out. Tyler Palko was a complete joke. And then they had Brady Quinn, and So like the year before the Chiefs traded for Alex Smith and brought in Andy Reid, they were 2-14, and since then they've been 44-24, and there's of course the Chiefs have Dave Tube is one of the best special teams coaches in the league, so they just they get elevation there. Their defense, I think in the 2013 season was extremely good, and since then they've been very just opportunistic. I would consider like maybe one of those early Dennis Green defenses where they give up some yards, but they take the ball away at a huge clip. But when I look at the Chiefs, I think they have issues with like a guy like Dontari Poe is a free agent, and he hasn't played well in 2 or 3 years up front. Eric Berry, played this season on the franchise tag, and he's one of the best safeties in the league. He's going to command money similar to Harrison Smith. Yeah. And then the fact that they only have $4 million in cap room, you're going to have to make some tough decisions, and having something known, even if it's limited at the quarterback position, in my opinion, goes a long way towards being able to make sound decisions at other places in the roster. And so my thought is that I think if the Chiefs can, they should try to draft his replacement. I think Smith, Smith handled the situation with Colin Kaepernick in 2012 about as well as you could. And so I don't foresee him having an issue at 30, 32, 33 years old of being pushed. But the idea that they're going to be able to go into next season with somebody like Tony Romo without having to make a substantial overhaul to their roster, generally good roster, I think that would be foolhardy. And I think as a Minnesota Twins fan, although I don't watch them as much anymore, it was kind of like how we felt in the 2001 through 2010. It's like the team's competitive every year, and we sort of lose sight of that fact, and we get mad because they can't win in the playoffs, and then they decide that for the next 5 years they're going to be not even competitive anymore. I think Chiefs fans need to realize that before Reid and Smith, they made the playoffs 3 times in 15 years. And so you just have to be, I think, a little careful, and you have to pick your spots when you try to go about changing a quarterback position.
The Twins are the Bengals of Major League Baseball.
They were the Bengals. They are now the Browns.
Yeah, now they're the Browns.
Yes, they were the Bengals.
Yeah. Well, maybe the Bengals continue to go down this cliff that they're kind of started to go on. We'll see, but they've got a lot of talent on their roster. So would you say Pittsburgh's offensive struggles had more to do with Kansas City's defense, or would you say that had to do more with cold weather?
A little. I mean, so Kansas City has one of the best corners in the league in Marcus Peters, so I think that certainly helps. Still hurts. But the Chiefs had it still does hurt if you're a Vikes fan. And but the Chiefs pressured Ben Roethlisberger on 3 of like 30 dropbacks, and so he was standing back there. They got that nice tip ball by Frank Zombo that was intercepted by Barry, and then they did do a good job of tackling on Sunday. I would just say that if it was just partially the Chiefs defense, but also I think the Steelers were also really just taking what the Chiefs were giving them, and in many cases on 3rd and 7 they were giving them 5 yards, and they ended up taking the 5 yards. The Chiefs did do a good job on a couple of short yardage run plays with Bell of making the stop. Which was sort of unusual given that the rest of the history with that game. But I think a combination of those two things. If Pittsburgh plays that way offensively against New England, they're not going to have a chance.
No.
So just because New England has such such an elevated option at the quarterback position that you leave them. You score 3s, they're going to score 7s. I think.
Yeah. I wonder if Todd Haley's just like, this offense on the other side of the ball is not doing very well. Maybe if I just do some conservative play calling until I have to make some tougher play calls or some more aggressive play calls. Maybe he thought, well, as long as they aren't doing much, we can just be a little bit more conservative and run Bell or whatever. I don't know.
Well, and I think. Big Ben Roethlisberger has had, he's had issues throwing interceptions on the road. And so, that probably figured in, as sort of, as much as I thought Pittsburgh handled that game, the Chiefs were one turnover touchdown away from having, changing that game the whole time. And I think one of the underrated things that happened the other night was that the Chiefs had one of the best special teams units in the league. And I think from a grading perspective, the Steelers have one of the worst. And the Steelers, their kicker was amazing and their coverage units were amazing. They really shut down that aspect of the Chiefs, attack. And so, I think they did go about it well. They were the conservatism, I think, was warranted, and it ended up working for them.
All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back right after this. Do you like shopping on Amazon? Well, now you can do it by helping the show at the same time. Go to the website youdon'tknowjackshow.com and click on any of the Amazon links, and then you can bookmark it. And every time you shop on Amazon, click the bookmark. It's the easiest way to support us without any extra cost to you. Now back to the show. Back on the You Don't Know Jack show, joined again by Eric Eager of Pro Football Focus, and just got done talking a little bit about Pittsburgh-Kansas City game. Now we'll move on as Pittsburgh goes to New England for the AFC Championship game, and then, of course, that team from the state in which you live going to the Falcons.
Yeah. Well, so what's been fun about this postseason, I think, is that in every game but one, we've had a direct rematch from this particular season. And actually, last night I watched back from Week 8 when Atlanta beat Green Bay 33-32 in the Georgia Dome. Mm-hmm. And Green Bay, this is even before they sort of got their mojo back, right? Like they were still sort of really weak defensively. They didn't have Quinton Rollins or Demarius Randall, although those guys haven't played fantastic. They didn't have Clay Matthews, and then on the offensive side of the ball, they were missing Jared Cook, Ty Montgomery, James Starks, and Randall Cobb. They had Nelson, which is a big deal, which they might not have Nelson this week. But the Packers, I think, have every bit the firepower and the quarterback, I think, especially to hold up and to be competitive with the Falcons. I think the spread for the game is like a -4.5. I think I would put it more as like a -1 if you're so Atlanta at -1. I would say that it's probably less than a field goal game. And I wouldn't be surprised if Green Bay won the game outright, which should just pain the heck out of Vikings fans. You don't get too many 18-point comebacks, and when Dallas got that 18-point comeback, you really hope that they would go ahead and just finish that one, but it was not to be on Sunday.
Yeah, Aaron of the You Don't Know Jack show was a little bit upset. He's a Cowboys fan, so you can imagine what he was thinking when they came all the way back. He said, "Well, you just should have just stayed down," which is true because I was starting to get my hopes up too, as hoping that they would beat the Packers, of course. Mm-hmm. That game too is so intriguing because it looks like it should be I think they have it at like a 60-point spread between, or not spread, but total scoring. And I think everybody wants to take the over on it, but it just seems like, well, everybody thinks it's going to be a high-scoring game, and then all of a sudden we get there and it might be low-scoring. I don't know, but it'll be an interesting game. I think that's for sure. But if I had to put money on it, as much as I hate to say it, I'm going to put it on Rodgers because this has an odd feeling of how they won the Super Bowl in 2010 when they had all those injuries and they still won it all against Pittsburgh. And I think if they play Pittsburgh I think they beat Pittsburgh, but if they play New England, I think New England wins.
Yeah, I mean, New England's difficult, right? Because their offense, has the best quarterback in the game. At least right now, I think Brady has a little bit of an edge. And Green Bay's defense isn't great, so you can imagine, somebody like, somebody like Chris Hogan or, Martellus Bennett kind of having a big game, but they were very shaky against a decent Texans defense last week. I don't know. I would have to say in that game you're more counting on New England's defense, who hasn't really played anybody of note for probably half a season, shutting down Aaron Rodgers, which I don't know. Like you said, I'm having difficulties betting against Rodgers at this point in the season.
I had no problem doing it last week because I thought Dallas was gonna beat them or at least by one score, if not two, and that was wrong because it looked like they just came in flat. I thought the Cowboys did against Green Bay, and then Green Bay's offense was hot to start the game, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think So I had the difference. So that's part of becoming sort of an analytics person, and I had no problem betting batting with the Packers getting 5 points, but and then the over that ended up being a decent play last week for us, but it feels a little dirty doing that, I guess.
Yeah, that's for sure. So
I just don't think Dallas's defense is particularly good. I think their biggest strength this year was the fact that their offense was only making them play, substantially fewer snaps than other defenses, just kind of like in 2014. And I thought that a team that could sort of make them work a little bit was going to expose them.
Yeah.
Which they did. Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought the offense was going to be too much for Green Bay's defense, and I thought Dak and Zeke would outscore the Packers, but obviously that didn't happen. So looking at the Pittsburgh and New England game, what do you think about that game, and who do you like?
New England. I think not only does New England win the game, but I'm slightly confident that they'll cover the 6 points. Yeah.
Any reason why you think Pittsburgh doesn't win the game? Like you think a turnover is the difference, or what do you think?
No, I mean I think Pittsburgh's playing really well, but a lot of the things for which they exploited in Kansas City don't exist in New England. So as I'm looking at something I wrote up for my spread picks, you have Alan Branch and Malcolm Brown, sort of their two defensive tackles, are 5th and 6th in our run stop percentages among defensive tackles. So if you look at like the number of substantial run plays they make versus how many snaps they play, they're some of the most productive in the league. And then you have Malcolm Butler and Logan Ryan are in the top dozen players in the league at corner. And so last week the Chiefs struggle. The Chiefs had a bit of a difficulty because they don't put Marcus Peters anywhere but the left side of the defense. And so, of course, Pittsburgh knows this and puts, Antonio Brown on the left side of their offense to match up against Terrence Mitchell, who is just signed off the street, and so there's just some issues there. And I don't think those issues are there with New England. I think New England does a very good job of scheming coverage. Not to say that Brown and Bell won't get their run, but they're not going to get 274 combined yards of offense like they did against Kansas City. So, in that regard, Pittsburgh barely beat a Kansas City team, with all of those chips slipping over in Arrowhead. I think the Patriots are far better than the Chiefs, and so that's where I'm sitting there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think New England obviously has the better coach, and I would definitely say quarterback as well. And usually, when you have the better coach, better quarterback, usually, not in the case of the Seahawks, I guess Matt Ryan was definitely having a better year than Russell Wilson, but I would say I'd put money on Brady and Belichick in Foxborough in a championship game. Last year, I think it was different because they were on the road, and I just think Pittsburgh is gonna make a mistake late in this game, or might maybe not even be close. Who knows? Depending on how the Steelers come out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's always fun to see a close game, but I could very much see the Patriots running away with this, but I also could see the firepower of the Steelers keeping it close. So, yep.
All right, and then so assuming New England and Green Bay get to the Super Bowl, who do you like in that game?
Well, I would say New England beats either Atlanta or Green Bay,
Okay.
if given the opportunity. Of course, injuries are always a big deal, and I do know that like they have like Malcolm Mitchell and one of their other receivers aren't particularly healthy. But yeah, I mean, I think. New England's, I think in our grading system, the second highest graded run defense and the highest graded pass coverage unit. I just think those are huge advantages for them. And so I think that their strength plus their coach. I mean, I don't think Mike Tomlin's substantially worse as a coach than Bill Belichick, but he's certainly not as good. I think Bill Belichick represents a huge upgrade over Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn if he were to face one of them in the Super Bowl. So
yeah, it's so you don't think Mike Tomlin's just a cheerleader, huh?
No, I mean I think the Vikings throughout the course of their franchise have missed opportunities to elevate. So you've seen all these sort of coaches. Bill Musgrave gets fired in Oakland because they're afraid of losing one of their quarterback coach. You see that sometimes. Lovie Smith was fired because the Bucks wanted to keep Dirk Cutter, so they elevate. It would be flippant to say something like, well, the Vikings should have fired Dennis Green so they could have kept Tony Dungy, or fired Dennis Green so they could have kept Brian Billick. But Brad Childress was uninspiring enough in his first year as the Vikings head coach that I think somebody a little bit more on the progressive end could have made a very impassioned case for elevating Mike Tomlin over Brad Childress back then. I think we have a very different history as a Vikings fans.
Yeah, well, and I think part of that too, in the Vikings case, they probably weren't ready to take such a young head coach. I think Tomlin was in his low 30s at the time of his hire at Pittsburgh, so maybe the Vikings weren't ready to make that step.
Yeah, he was younger than Darren Sharper, I think, at the time, even though Darren Sharper was in his secondary. So that's a decent point, and none of us could have thought that, but I think most of us that looked at the way in which Tomlin turned around that defense and sort of conducted himself, it probably it could have warranted such a move.
Absolutely. All right, so that's going to do it for regular NFL talk. We'll talk Vikings when we come back to the You Don't Know Jack show.
Heading to Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Baltimore, New York, London, or anywhere in the world and need a rent-a-car? Well, check out CarRental8.com, where you'll find the same car for less money. CarRental8.com sells all the brands like Dollar, Thrifty, Budget, Avis, Hertz, Alamo, Europcar, and so much more at affordable rates. We'll beat any price by a minimum of 30%. So check us out online at CarRental8.com or call us at 1-813-343-8138. That's 1-813-343-8138.
Use the promo JACKSHOW5, that's JACSHOW5, to get 5% off your next car rental. Use all capital letters when you type in the promo code. Now back to the show. And welcome back to the You Don't Know Jack Show. Again, joined by Eric Eager of Pro Football Focus. And Eric, as we talk a little bit about the Vikings, a little bit more of our forte, as we both write about the Vikings a little bit, as I just started writing for the Armchair All-Americans. I got an article on the Vikings running back situation coming out probably today or tomorrow. I have it already done. It's just a matter of the publishers putting it forward. So looking at the Vikings, considering the Bridgewater torn ACL, considering everything else that happened injury-wise, and just the situation with Turner leaving and Shermer coming in and all that type of things, how do you think the 2016 season went for the Vikings?
I mean, if you take the long view, I think 8-8 was probably something that people, on the immediate injury of Bridgewater were thinking, oh gosh, can we even get to 8-8 this year?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, if you look at a 5-0 start,
Yep.
You look at, I was working a Bears Detroit game, during the Vikings' early winning streak, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, the Vikings play both of these teams twice, moving
Mm-hmm.
forward here, and I was watching a Jacksonville Indianapolis game, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they play these teams twice, they play these teams again, and so if you look in a season where you play the AFC South, in a division that includes the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions, although the Lions kind of got lucky a few times this year and elevated themselves. In a year where Green Bay's down, and to their credit, they beat Green Bay when they were down. 8-8's a disappointment, especially, given all this kind of turmoil they've had, both at beginning of the season at offensive coordinator and then near the end with sort of the defensive calls that ended up being overturned by some veteran players in the secondary. It's disappointing. You'd like to have seen them play, but at the same time, I kind of after all these years of watching the Vikings be sort of competent, but not championship level, I take sort of more of a Ricky Bobby approach to the Vikings, whereas if they're not gonna win the Super Bowl, then I might I'm more or less looking for draft picks. And
Right.
The funny thing about the NFL is almost every game is entertaining, right? So it's not like baseball where you want your team to be in the hunt so that they're entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm sort of I view it as a disappointment, but I can see somebody's argument where if you look at the long view, 8-8 is something of a victory given all the adversity they've had to go through.
Yeah, I think Andy on the Purple for the Win podcast, you did an episode or two with him. I think he said it pretty well when he said 5-0, man. That's you coming back from 5-0. You were 5-0 after the bye week, going to Philadelphia, obviously a team that was hot at the time, and I don't know if they lost a home game all season, but then losing to the Bears that next Monday night, I think that was just the killer of the season right there. When you lose to the Bears, and then it just seemed like to be a collapse from that point. But the Vikings just could not get enough offensive consistency, and it just seemed like whenever the defense would play well, the offense wouldn't, and when the offense played really well, the defense didn't play so well. So it just didn't seem like the kind of like the Twins, where pitching is good one night and then the hitting is good the next night.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, there are a lot of positives to take from the season, but I think there are also a lot of places where you look and you think, gosh, that's a missed opportunity. You look at Anthony Barr, a player that, was one of our highest graded linebackers last season, is now one of our lowest graded linebackers a season later. You look at, Sharif Floyd, who, didn't do much as a rookie, but in the 2 subsequent years when he was on the field was actually a pretty decent under tackle, like 3 technique kind of guy. He doesn't play much of the year. You look at then the Linval Josephs, the Harrison Smiths of the world. Even they didn't play up to the standard they set in 2015. So then that mitigates a lot of the awesomeness that happens when a guy like Daniil Hunter is like the leading run stopper from our statistics as a 4-3 end.
He's
He's not only a 12.5 sack guy, but a relentless run defender. That curbs a little bit of and again, Everson Griffin didn't have quite as good of a year in 2016 as he did in 2015. So you look at that defense, and it's a good defense, but if you get all hands on deck the way that it was in 2015, and then you get a little bit of an improved play from Sendejo, the emergence of Xavier Rhodes, fantastic play from Terrence Newman, those kinds of things, and it could have literally been the best defense in the NFL, and it's just a missed opportunity. To say nothing of the offense, I think if the defense, if the defense plays up to the way that we thought it was going to when they started 5-0, I still think they win 10 games. They just let the Detroit game slip through their fingers. They let the Washington game get away from them at the beginning, and then of course the Indianapolis game, their defense and their offense didn't show up for that one. So
yeah, I think the Vikings really made some bad coaching decisions, especially in that Detroit game. Mike Zimmer, what are you thinking? There's 27 seconds on the clock, and you call a timeout before a 3rd and goal. You don't want to give them any time. Come on, at least.
Yeah, but it's also, it's partial that, and it's partial execution. Like Blair Walsh was supposed to kick the ball to the 5-yard line, and he kicks it into the end zone, and it gives
missed an extra point.
He missed an extra point. So I think the scenario is very different in terms of how we view Zimmer now. I think last season we viewed him as this defensive genius who has completely turned around the franchise, and I think the reality is something a little bit more nuanced. I think he's still a very good defensive coach, but I don't think he's omnipotent in that regard. And he has shown a relative incapability to control what happens on the offensive side. So I've been a part of a lot of football teams with a lot of head coaches, and even when the head coach is a defensive guy, he has the responsibility, or he has the power to go over to the offensive side of the ball and say, this person is not getting the job done, and you need to play somebody else. And the fact that they continue to play TJ Clemmings at left tackle when clearly, a replacement level left tackle would actually been better, I think is one of those things where you look at Zimmer and you think to yourself, like, he's not perfect as a head coach. He certainly does not know how to handle the other side of the ball in terms of giving other people responsibility, but being still in charge, and that was just something, TJ Clemmings, the poor guy, he's like, it's not really his fault he's out there at this point.
No, it's not.
But the fact that he was, somebody's got to answer for that, I think.
Absolutely. And looking he didn't play really well, obviously, but I still would say Rashad Hill played better than TJ Clemmings did in that small sample size we saw of him in the Bears game. And I think that he definitely easily could have been starting at left tackle over TJ Clemmings.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question.
So, taking a look here, do you going back to Zimmer here quick before we get on to some more of these questions, do you think that he needs to start looking himself in the mirror, and do you think he'll maybe make some improvements, like going to the offensive side and telling Pat Shurmur that this is not working so well, or this is really working, you need to keep doing that type of thing?
I'm not sure. He's, is he like Brad Childress? Brad Childress is an older guy when he was the Vikings coach, but Childress, almost to a fault changed from year to year, from, being hardline guy to being, the nice guy to being hardline guy again and everything. I don't think that's optimal. It doesn't seem, the way that he treated his eye ailment, it doesn't seem like he's particularly able to get rid of his stubbornness. But no. if he is, he might be able to, help this team forward. I think it's certainly, if he's paying attention this year, is certainly a wake-up call for him.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw, he was on ESPN not too long ago, and he was basically putting off the importance of his eye injury, basically saying, well, I'm here to win, we're trying to win games and all this stuff, and he really didn't say much about his own health. And as much as the Vikings would like to win, your health is way more important than winning and football.
Yeah, I mean, it was something else to see him with the eye patch and all that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, yeah, and all the pirate jokes coming from the players too. That was kind of funny.
That's right. That's right.
So, thoughts on the Bradford trade? I know it seems like it's the talk of every Vikings podcast nowadays. But what's your thoughts on the Bradford trade? Performance-wise, do you think he was worth it? And value-wise, do you think he was worth it?
I think he played okay given the issues that he had. I mean, he obviously set the completion record, which was something that is kind of hollow when you consider the fact that his average depth of target on throws was like one of the lowest I've ever seen, mid 6 yards. But when he actually went deep with the ball, he was one of the more accurate and one of the highest rated quarterbacks in the league. So, he's got the talent. You just wonder whether it's coaching or whether it's just his mentality that he's just not capable of pulling the trigger as much as he needs to down the field, because he certainly has the arm strength for it, certainly has the accuracy for it. I would say that the Bradford trade is contingent upon what you do around him. Like if you slough off on the offensive line another season, then the Bradford trade is going to be a failure, independent of how Bradford plays, because he just can't overcome some of those things. He's not Tom Brady. Last season, Tom Brady, the Patriots had some of the worst graded offensive line play in the league, and they still made it to the AFC Championship game based on sort of scheme and things like that. And the Vikings tried that, but I think Bradford's not quite as good, and so you see some sloughing there in terms of output. I would say, what else are the Vikings really going to do? Exactly. It doesn't, you can't will Bridgewater's knee to be healthy. And so as much as you'd like to have him in the fold next year competing with Bradford, that's probably not going to be a reality. So I would say, I think in terms of, and you're also selling tickets too, right? It's the first season in US Bank Stadium. Bradford gave the Vikings an elevated level of hope that wouldn't have been there had they tried to go into the season with somebody like Sean Hill or Mark Sanchez or Mike Glennon or somebody like that. And so with that, I think it's a success. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the Vikings are going to achieve the same things that they were going to achieve with Teddy Bridgewater and that first round pick in their hands, but they can't control whether or not Bridgewater gets hurt. So you just have to move forward from that. And I think, Bradford has the possibility of being somebody who, like Alex Smith in Kansas City, gives them an extended amount of credibility and competence at the quarterback position, which, they really haven't had since, Dante Culpepper.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned this too, and I thought it was an interesting point. Adrian Peterson got hurt in that Green Bay game. Say he got hurt before the Bradford trade. Do you think the Vikings still make that trade?
So you're saying if they try to go into the season with like Jerick McKinnon, Matt Asiata, and Sean Hill?
Yeah. Yep. Or do you think they just sign someone like Mark Sanchez? Because I mean, you take the explosiveness of Adrian Peterson, which obviously has dwindled, but he can elevate when he's healthy and when he's playing up to his potential. Obviously, he's one of the best running backs in the game, but with that trade, McKinnon and Asiata are definitely not as good together. Maybe they have more abilities together, but they don't have the same running ability. Maybe together, put 2 and 1. Maybe they form an Adrian Peterson with McKinnon's athleticism and Asiata's power. But I don't know. I just don't know if you make that same trade with Peterson being hurt. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Tennessee game. So they ran the ball 28 times versus 35 times. Now that was with Sean Hill. In the Green Bay game, now he got hurt midway through, but they ran the ball 22 times versus passing at 36. So an increase there. if you look at week 3, now week 3 was weird because they got behind early, but okay, so they're again more 50-50. I would say that the impetus on the Vikings to actually get a quarterback becomes even higher if Peterson's hurt because of the ticket sales and those types of things. You're really trying to go into I don't think you try to go into the first season at US Bank Stadium with something mirroring the 2006 Vikings offense, right? Like elbow, you had Brad Johnson, you had Meweldy Moore and, Chester Taylor and Marcus. I like Marcus Robinson, but he's not a number 1 receiver. No. Travis Taylor, Jermaine Wade. I mean, you're talking about something that'll put the fan base to sleep, So I would say Bradford at least kept that from happening, Bradford trade. And then when Peterson went down, it actually, I think it actually helped the Vikings to some degree, especially when he came back against the Colts, how much they really do have to cater to him offensively to the detriment of their team.
Yeah, that offense was a part of my childhood, unfortunately, the 2006 offense.
Peterson, the 2006 year, I remember we just regraded it at PFF. So I remember it was my sophomore year in college and then junior year in college. And then we had to watch all the games again this year. It was just like, oh, wow. As a kid, as a child, we were so spoiled with Randy Moss and Chris Carter, Jake Reed, Robert Smith. Yeah, it's just like, and then we ended up putting up with that nonsense for a year, and change with the first year of Chili Ball.
Yeah. So moving along to Adrian Peterson, is he done in Minnesota, and is the running back of the future on the current roster? I mean, I think Jerick McKinnon definitely is going to stay, but I think Matt Asiata, all his the cap in his contract is very flexible if it's not expired. So what do you think about Peterson and then the situation with the rest of the guys?
Well, I mean, in a rational world, there's no way they bring Peterson back, even for free, because I think it just stunts the growth of the offense. I thought to myself, I think it's very real that the Vikings offense in 2015, while productive enough to get them to 11-5, was one of the worst things they could have done for Teddy Bridgewater, because they really had to. We look back and Teddy had a pretty good rookie year. And then the best thing that you could say about his sophomore year is an incomplete, because, they did so much, running of the football out of the I formation and in heavy sets. And that's just not the future of the NFL. If they go through that procedure again with Bradford, we're going to have Bradford's second year in Minnesota come up as an incomplete. Because and so, even if you were willing to play for nothing, he's not going to be a back where you're like, okay, we're just going to mix Peterson in and out, because it's, again, it's like, you think about, I like to think maybe of him as like a pass receiving only, no block tight end, right? Where, when he's in the football game, you're not going to run the ball, right? When Peterson's in the game, like, there's almost no way you're going to do anything creative offensively. Yeah. And that's bad for an offense. So I don't foresee him coming back. Jerick McKinnon, he averaged 3.4 yards a carry this year, which is quite bad. He averaged 2 yards a carry after contact, which is 50th out of 58 running backs. But, you have to be careful, because, again, like, it could have, Matt Asiata was the exact same yards after contact. So you look and you wonder, okay, is that just because they're getting hit by defensive linemen as opposed to linebackers and defensive backs? But, some of the best backs you look at, like, so Le'Veon Bell is about a full yard per carry after contact. Jordan Howard, Carlos Hyde, Mark Ingram, Jay Ajayi are all like in the threes in terms of yards per carry after contact. So you're talking about a full yard better, in places you can control. And again, I'm not exactly sure in terms of who they're getting hit by and that kind of thing, but it's just sort of a stat to throw out there. I think they finally started using McKinnon in the passing game, which is pretty good, especially, in the Colts game and then in the Bears game. So that was nice for us to see. I think you don't bring Asiata back unless there's a salary match with being a third running back. And I think even if you bring McKinnon back, you have to you have to bring in competition for him. Somebody like Wayne Gallman from Clemson, I think, is probably going to be a mid-round pick. Somebody like that I've seen thrown out there. I mean, the things about Asiata, Asiata's thought of as this, goal line back / pass protector. He was 49th out of 62 running backs in allowing pressure. So he was actually a pretty poor pass protector last year. McKinnon was actually quite a bit better than him, and Peterson's worse than both of them. So, I just think, and then running back's a place where you can cheaply upgrade. I think, somebody like, even something silly like Justin Forsett was out and, was let go multiple times this year. And he, and he would have been an upgrade over either of these guys, I think, this year. So, I would say McKinnon's part of a pair of running backs that the Vikings will go forward with this year.
Yeah. Well, an argument in my article that is coming out soon, I made an argument for McKinnon because the prior 2 years without the 32nd ranked offensive line for run blocking, by the way, McKinnon averaged 4.9 yards per carry in his first 2 seasons with the Vikings. Obviously, last year was very limited sample size, and the year before that he was doing the same thing with Asiata. But as I mentioned too in my article, Asiata has never broken 4 yards a carry, and the closest he got was 3.9, and he had 23 carries on that season.
Yeah, I was at the last ever game at the Metrodome, and Matt Asiata had 100 yards in that game. So that was probably that. Yeah. That probably was the one. The 2013 season was probably the season you're talking about. Yeah, and the thing is somebody who watches film, he doesn't play much special teams either. He doesn't make a huge contribution there. I just don't know, where he rests, because if he's the third running back, then he's just one injury away from being the second running back, and then you have the same issues all over again. I would say he's probably less than 50-50 to stay, and even if he does, he's probably on the roster bubble. So. Yep.
So we got about 5 minutes left with you here, Eric. Quickly run through some of these contract things. Adam Thielen, what do you think? Over, under $5.5 million a year? Do you think the Vikings just give him 1 year, or do you think they try and get him long term?
I would say that there's no reason why you shouldn't give him a long term deal. At worst, he's a third wide receiver. And a great special teams contributor in a league where special teams are important and teams play 3 wide receivers all the time.
Yeah. I think Thielen had a phenomenal season. He was making all the catches you can think of. I think he's a perfect receiver to pair with Diggs. I think now we just need to find that third guy in the receiving core that can kind of be either on the outside like Treadwell, or be in the slot. Maybe put Diggs in the slot, Treadwell on the other side.
Yeah, I think, and I think that third receiver has to be somebody big like Treadwell. Yeah, the other two guys. Although Thielen's actually sneaky, he's like
6'3".
Yeah, 6'2", but he's like 210. I think you're probably. Charles Johnson's sort of that big-bodied receiver, but he doesn't really play like one.
I don't think he's coming back either.
Yeah, and Treadwell's hasn't. There's nothing there to suggest that he's going to do anything this year, other than the fact that he was picked somewhere.
Yeah.
He was picked highly.
Yeah.
So.
Will Xavier Rhodes get his contract extension this offseason, or maybe after that incident with Terrence Newman, maybe they just give him don't even do anything with it till next season? I don't know. And if the Vikings do give him an extension, which I think would be foolish not to, do you think he gets more than Josh Norman, or do you think he gets like right around the number where the Giants cornerback, can't remember.
Janoris
Jenkins got, yeah.
I would say, what that number moves up. I think he's probably in the ballpark of Jenkins, probably not where Norman is.
Okay.
So I think somewhere in that area. I mean, Xavier Rhodes, the problem is this is the first year he's ever played a full good season. You know, in 2014, 2015, he struggled out of the gate with penalties and those kinds of things, and then emerged in the second half of the year. So, you know, there are still some question marks around him. This is the first year he caught the football, which is like one of those things where, you know, interceptions are sort of overrated, but they can turn games on their head. And Xavier Rhodes certainly did that a few times this year. I think he had the most interceptions by a Vikings cornerback since Brian Williams in 2003. So you're talking about a very good season, and I think he should probably be rewarded there. You just have to make sure that, you know, they do have a ton of cap room, but they do have to figure out the offensive line.
Yep. Any other contract extensions you think that should be done, or anything on that?
No, I think Rhodes is right there. If Anthony Barr would have played this season the way he played last season, I think that would have been a candidate. But you're almost to the point where you might, you know, try to motivate him by not, you know, giving him his fifth-year option or something like that. But I don't see anybody there that requires a contract extension right away.
So do you think Teddy will play again? And if he does and he plays as good and he's as healthy as ever, would you take him over Bradford?
Yeah, just because he I think he represents more of an unknown, and the unknown can be higher than Bradford.
Yeah, I think his ceiling might be higher.
Yeah, his agility and just the way that team rallies behind him. I think in terms of arm strength, he's not quite there with Bradford, but Bradford doesn't use it very much. So,
yeah.
You know, and again, I think that Teddy's sort of universally respected in that locker room, and that's something that you can't put a price on.
Absolutely. Do you think Norv Turner still resigns with Teddy back at quarterback?
Yeah, I think with Peterson out, I think the Vikings would have probably done it, you know, gone through a similar approach. I think the offensive line is still bad with Teddy as the quarterback, and so the quick passing game, you know, Teddy hung onto the ball very long in 2015, like about 3 seconds per drop back. I don't think I think that gets him killed this year if he plays. So I think the short passing game with getting rid of the ball quickly would have been the formula even with Teddy. And I think Norv's resistance to that type of play calling would have gotten him in trouble again.
So how do you propose we fix the offensive line here quickly? Draft, free agency, trade? I know there's not a whole lot of draft tackles out there.
All the above.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, you go at like Andrew Whitworth is certainly the person you want to go after. He's one of our most efficient tackles this season. Ricky Wagner, somebody who's had an up and down career, but he's certainly up right now with Baltimore. Probably wouldn't be that expensive. You know, you have TJ Lang in terms of guards. You can pluck out of the Green Bay Packers system. They don't seem particularly gung-ho about retaining some of their players.
Yeah.
And you know, and draft, yeah. But the problem with the draft is, again, you're flipping coins that are loaded. So because you don't have a first-round pick. So I think all of the above. You can't put any of your eggs in any of those one basket. You just have to put a ton of eggs in all of those baskets.
So assuming all goes well, moves-wise, how do you think the Vikings finish next year?
They're fighting with Green Bay. I mean, the Vikings have a better roster than Green Bay if you look at everything except for quarterback.
Yep.
And so as 2015 showed us, if the quarterback position isn't the absolute greatest for Green Bay, they're in the class of Minnesota.
All right. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Eric. I better let you go. Thanks for joining us on the You Don't Know Jack show, and maybe we'll have you on again sometime.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
And that is Eric of Pro Football Focus joining us on the You Don't Know Jack show, and that is going to wrap things up for myself, Carson. Don't forget, you can find the show on iTunes, on YouTube, on Stitcher, on TuneIn Radio, SoundCloud, Google Play, all those platforms. And don't forget, you can help out the show by donating through Amazon. You can buy stuff using our links, and we'll get a return back. So go to the website youdon'tknowjackshow.com and do that. And you can also use the promo code JACKSHOW5. That's JACSHOW5, and all capital letters. If you use that promo code, you get 5% off your next car rental from carrental8.com. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Carson and Eric Eager, we will be back with Jonah and Aaron next week. And for myself, we will... don't forget to check out my articles. You can check those out at armchairallamericans.com. And you can follow them on Twitter and like them on Facebook, and they have an Instagram account as well. So you can check out my work in those places. And don't forget, you also can follow Eric Eager on Twitter at EricEager82. And until next time, I'm Carson saying so long and have a good week, everybody.
Hey listeners, don't forget to find You Don't Know Jack Show on Facebook at facebook.com/You Don't Know Jack Show, Twitter at twitter.com/Don't Know Jack Show, and Instagram at instagram.com/You Don't Know Jack Show. You can also follow Carson on Twitter at Radio Ruben. Now back to the show.
Thanks for listening to the You Don't Know Jack Show with Jonah, Aaron, and Carson. If you want to read articles, get more information, or have questions about the show, go to our website, youdon'tknowjackshow.com. You can subscribe and listen to the show on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio.
I'm here so I won't get fined.